Hey, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. We are live. Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Come on in. Like, share, tag. Let me know that you can hear me okay. Good evening. Hey, sis. I see you out there. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. As you're coming in, I want you to like, share, tag someone. Good evening. Happy Tuesday to everyone. Hope everyone's having a great evening. Thank you for sharing. Let me know that you can hear me okay. Last time we had some sound situations, so hoping the sound is a little bit better this time. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good evening. Happy to be on again. Thank you, Yvette. Appreciate you, girl. Happy Tuesday. Happy October. Glad to be on. We got a great conversation, a great dialogue that's getting ready to happen tonight. I'm going to give it just a minute before we go ahead and get started. I know some more people will jump on. As we get started. Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. Good evening. Happy Tuesday. Glad to be on again. As you're coming in, go ahead and share, tag, like. We're going to go ahead and get started. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I know some more people will probably jump on as we kind of get started into our conversation. But I am definitely excited tonight to talk about this much needed conversation of domestic violence. If you do not know, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so I'm so excited to have my special guest on with me on tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about this topic. And so hopefully something that is said tonight will be empowering, will bring some clarity, and even help whoever it's meant to help on tonight. So my first guest, she is not a stranger. She has been on with me before. Good evening. Good evening. Hey, like, share, and tag as you come in. So my first guest is not a stranger. She has been on with me before. And I am super, super, super excited as always to dialogue with her. I was going to say my auntie, but it is my auntie. Erica Ward. I'm so excited to have her on tonight to talk about this much needed conversation. Hey, auntie.
Hey, good to be here
Hey,
again.
yes. So, my aunt is currently the Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Program Coordinator and Facilitator for the EAL internships for Riverside Health Systems. And besides that, you have over 30 years, right, of behavioral health experience, including helping individuals that have substance abuse issues, have had substance abuse issues, mental illness. So I'm excited to have you on to bring a needed perspective into this conversation. Thank you for agreeing to come on tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And I also have another special guest on tonight. Her name is Nisha Himes, and I'm so excited to be able to talk to her on tonight and for you all to hear her story and really be empowered. She is a domestic violence abuse survivor turned activist. She's also a domestic violence education specialist. She is the founder of Nisha Christine Consulting and the Grow Foundation, GROW Foundation, which I know she's going to talk to us a little bit about. And that her foundation helps to provide domestic violence awareness, outreach, and support. And she has definitely a powerful story and she has a wealth of information to help individuals. So I'm super excited. Hey Nisha.
Hello, hello.
Hello. So I have these two powerhouses on with me tonight. So listen, I need you to go ahead and tag some people that need to be on. Go ahead and share this post. Let's go ahead and get started. So, Nisha, I want to start first with you. If you can talk a little bit about your story. I know you are a domestic violence, domestic abuse survivor. If you can tell us a little bit about kind of that journey and how that kind of came to be.
Sure. And thank you. Well, can you hear me okay before I get
Uh-huh.
okay?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Kia, for having me. It's an honor to be up here with you and Miss Erica, who I've known for years at this point. I am a survivor of domestic violence. I was in a very toxic, unhealthy, violent relationship for about 5 years. In the first year, I didn't either see the red flags, either I didn't know they were red flags, or I chose to ignore them. The second, third, fourth year included that I would say verbal, emotional, psychological abuse, the gaslighting, the control, the manipulation. And the last year included all of the above, plus physical abuse as well. It started off just like any relationship when you're, feeling somebody. I was introduced to him by a former coworker, and we hit it off in the beginning, and I didn't see the signs. And the thing about domestic violence is I think we have a lot of us have a misconception that you can just recognize immediately when someone is abusive, that you're going to go on a first date and they may put their hands on you and it's just like, wow, this person is abusive. And before I go even any further, I just want to give a trigger warning. We might have some survivors who are listening in the audience or may know someone who is going through abuse, or you may have experienced it yourself. So if anything that I say or any of us say here, please just be mindful of your mental health and of your feelings and honor those boundaries that you need to set for yourself. I always give a trigger warning when I talk about this, but it started off with like any other relationship when you're feeling a person, and then just started seeing some things as far as not wanting me to do the things I like to do or love to do. Very much into spoken word, especially at that time, was going to open mics a lot. He said things like, well, why do you have to go to the open mic tonight? I barely get to see you. Why don't you just hang out with me? And I'm a mom of two, and this is somebody that I dated after that relationship, the relationship with my youngest child's father ended. So I don't even have children with this person. And it was still a difficult thing to get out of. But then those little tidbits of, well, why you got to hang out with your friends today? Can you just hang out with me? Or, who was you on the phone with? And why did it take you so long to answer the phone? And was you talking to a guy? Was you talking to your child's father? And it's just little things, and it's not outright. You know what I mean? And then by the time it became disrespectful words, maybe if I asked a question, he might say something along the lines of, well, it doesn't take a genius. Like, what are you, dumb? And I'm kind of like, well, who are you talking to? And then it's, oh, you're being too sensitive. I was just joking. You're overreacting. You're trying to pick a fight. You must have had a bad day. So then you start questioning these things in your mind, like, oh, well, am I overreacting? Am I being too sensitive? Am I picking a fight? And then it just changed from there to where it became the name calling, telling me that I was worthless, telling me that nobody would want me. He was the only person that wanted me. I got 2 kids, 2 different dads. Nobody wanted somebody like that. I'm working a dead end job, like all these just different things. So then that became somewhat of the norm. And what I tell people is once they get you mentally, the rest is easy. So if I can break down someone mentally, and someone who already hadn't taken the time to heal from previous relationships, right? Do the work necessary to heal within themselves and know their worth. So it was easy to just chip away and chip away. And by the time it became physically abusive, I had already been in an abusive relationship. I just didn't identify it as such because there weren't the bruises, there weren't the black eyes or anything. And then when it became physical, well, I fight back. So that's what I would tell myself. Well, I fight back. Everybody fights, So I never thought domestic violence looked like me. So, by the time I got out of that relationship, I started sharing my story about a year and a half later via that gift of spoken word poetry. Started getting asked to speak at various places like schools, conferences, shelters, awareness conferences, and things like that. And I wanted to do more because what started happening is survivors started reaching out to me, wanting advice, wanting, how did you do it? How did you get out? And I wanted to get a job in like a prosecutor's office or a shelter, things like that. And something that I was told throughout that process was, well, you don't have the right experience because you don't have a degree. Pretty much, like that's pretty much what was it. And for me, I say it all the time, I'm all for higher education. I'm actually in school now, but there's no piece of paper on this earth that outweighs someone's lived experience. If you've never gone through it yourself, if whether it's domestic violence, sexual assault, some other form of trauma, if you have not lived that yourself, your degree in that subject matter does not outweigh someone's lived experience. So I said, well, I'm going to do something. And I decided to start my own nonprofit organization, which is GROW, Girls Recognizing Our Worth. And at the time I was working at a law firm, they did small business setup and nonprofit setup, and they helped me get it off the ground, I's dotted, T's crossed. And in August, we turned 7 years old. So here I am in a nutshell.
Yeah, I love that you really touched on a couple of key points. And one of the biggest things that you said was that, it wasn't something that you recognized
Right,
by just face value and looking
right.
at that person. And I think, that's something that happens to a lot of individuals. They get into the relationship, like you said, it starts off like any other relationship. Oh, this person is cool. We're vibing, we get
Mhm.
along. And then, you're in your feelings. And then by the time you recognize, oh, wait, this person is abusing me, you're already kind of emotions entangled. You're already in that in deep with that person. Can you talk a little bit, about what domestic violence is? Because I do believe that there is this misconception
Mhm.
that domestic violence is being hit.
Right.
And if someone is not physically beating you, you
Mhm.
know how we see it on TV. We see
Right.
it in the movies where someone's throwing somebody down the steps, or they're giving them a black eye. Or and if people feel, there are some people that feel like if a person is not physically hitting you, then you aren't being abused. Can
Right.
you speak to that?
Yes, that's a good point. So it's basically a pattern of behavior used to intimidate, harm, control, manipulate, isolate another person. It's methodical. It's consistent. The whole purpose, the whole premise behind abuse is about power and control. The thing is, one of the misconceptions is that it only happens to women, that women are always the victims and men are always the aggressors. But that couldn't be further from the truth. It affects us all. It doesn't care where you live, what your zip code is, what's in your bank account, what your color is, what your nationality is, ethnicity, or any of that, what your education is. You can have someone who's experiencing domestic violence who is working towards getting their GED, but you can also have a professor at a university. You can have a pastor at a church. You can have the person working at your grocery store, your post office. It doesn't matter. We all know someone who has been impacted by domestic violence, whether we know it or not. And the thing is, it can happen to men. It happens to men. It's happening in the LGBTQIA plus community, and when you have someone who is exerting that power and control, not just physically, but if I am controlling you financially, financial abuse is prevalent in 99% of domestic violence cases. So if I'm controlling your financial resources to where you couldn't afford to leave if you wanted to, I'm making you turn over your paychecks every week, or I'm not allowing you to work, or I'm disrupting your job so that you're losing your job or you're getting reprimanded. And now you're on shaky grounds when it comes to maintaining employment. And if you can't maintain employment, how do you sustain yourself? How do you pay your bills? How do you feed your children? How do you pay your car payment? You might have that emotional, that verbal abuse. If I'm constantly berating you verbally every single day, making you feel this big, and then how you're made to feel as a result of being berated every single day verbally, that's where that verbal and emotional abuse comes in. And psychologically, if I make you feel crazy, that's where gaslighting, we've all heard the term. It's a hot topic in 2023, 2022. It seems like all I heard was gaslighting, 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 but kind of in like a comedic way, when it's a really serious method of psychological and emotional abuse, when you use manipulation to have the person, the victim, question their perception of reality or judgment. If I make you feel like you're crazy or you're overreacting or you're not remembering things correctly, then when this outright abuse is happening, you're wondering if it really is, because you're just like, did this really happen? Or like, did they push me down the stairs or did I trip? I don't know. I can't be sure. And there's so many other different types. We have religious abuse. We have when someone's using your faith against you, making it so you can't go, maybe you can't go to the mosque, or maybe they're telling your pastor, look, they're not being a good wife. And God says that, the Bible says, scripture says that you're supposed to obey your husband, or whatever it is. There's digital abuse, which is very prevalent, especially amongst our youth. We're attached to their electronics, right? So if I'm using GPS trackers under your car, the Ring app to monitor who you're opening the door for, how long you're outside talking to that person, if I'm putting an Apple AirTag in your purse or in your child's teddy bear or in the tablet, and I'm monitoring you digitally, or if I'm posting pictures online that maybe was private between us, or videos, I'm harassing you on social media. And the thing about domestic violence, it's not like you're experiencing one form of abuse and that's it. It's often one act, or one specific act can be different forms of abuse all occurring simultaneously. So if I'm monitoring where you go every single day, I got a tracker on your phone, on your car. So not only are you digitally abusing me, but there's that emotional abuse. Like, I'm terrified, I'm scared, I don't know when you're going to pop out of a bush, so to speak. But I'm also psychologically, I'm paranoid. I don't know what to think. I don't know if I'm tripping or if I'm overreacting or if this is really happening. So it's just so many different types, even reproductive coercion. If I'm not allowing you to use contraception, if I'm poking holes in condoms or switching out your birth control. I've met survivors where their partner has continuously kept them pregnant, like continuously, to where now they have so many children. It's very hard to get into a shelter. It's very hard to get help from the state. It's very hard to get help anywhere because you're literally attached to this person. You have 5, 6, 7, 10 children with them. So it's just, for the sake of time, and I know Ms. Erica has a lot to say too. I could keep going, but it's so many different types that just don't fit into that neat little box. And even when it's physical, if you've grown up in an environment where violence is normal, if you learn to function in dysfunction and healthy looks weird to you, then violence is what's your version of, well, this is how I show love because this is how my mama showed my daddy love, or my daddy showed my mama love. It's violence is normal for me. Then you don't even, there's a lot of people who don't realize they're in abusive relationships because that's all they're accustomed to. So it's just a vicious cycle, and it's far beyond bruises and black eyes.
Right. I mean, what a great point that you brought up about growing up. And I read something that said that abuse is learned.
Mm.
That, we people often try to attribute it to, oh, mental illness, or I'm taking a controlled substance, I'm an alcoholic. And those things can play a part. And I know Aunt Erica can speak to this a little bit more. Those things can definitely play a part. But what in reading it is that abuse is usually a learned behavior, and because they have grown up in a home where there was some sort of abuse taking place, to your point, Nisha, is that that becomes their norm.
Mhm.
And I think that breeds this school of thought that people have, that if we ain't knocking each other around, then it's not love. If we don't have that, what they call that struggle love. If you're not cussing me out twice a month, if you're not talking bad, if we're not down in the trenches with each other, then it's not love. And a lot of that comes from dysfunctional childhoods
Mhm.
that people grow up in. And like you said, Nisha, it becomes the norm for them. They believe that that is how relationships, somewhere in their mind, unconsciously, they believe that is how relationships are supposed to function. And anything outside of that then appears weird to them because this is their norm. Go ahead, Aunt Erica. I know you have seen this a little bit in your.
I am enjoying Nisha. Look, I'll just chime in here and there. She's got it. But I will say, most definitely, individuals who have had adverse childhood experiences with abuse, that have been exposed to abuse, and have been in an environment where it's unhealthy, they have learned that that is what's expected. It doesn't they've never learned any other way to manage or to cope. They haven't learned how to manage their own emotions and their feelings because they were traumatized in their youth a lot of times. So what they see, they replicate it. And oftentimes, they may not even understand why they do it. And that's the unfortunate part, that a lot of times the manipulation and control comes from difficult traumas that they've experienced in childhood, because they don't feel that they can have control over their life. And because they had childhood experiences that caused them to be unable to have control, then they start as an adult with a youthful mindset, of traumatized youthful mindset, demonstrating those same attempts to get some control over what's in my circle. And they may not only abuse their spouses or their domestic partner, they may abuse their children because they're trying to manage where they didn't feel they had control. And there's different mental illnesses that can actually result from having childhood experiences that where a lot of abuse and violence has occurred. um, Personality disorders are one category of that, and narcissistic personality disorder, which actually Nisha was speaking of, where they do a lot of gaslighting, and it's to have control because they feel out of control, and they have never learned the coping skills to manage when they don't feel in control. They never learned how to communicate appropriately. So they just react. They react with the only thing they know to do is what they've been exposed to, or they react on an emotional level that is not mature. And a lot of times, because they have a real love and relationship with the person, like Nisha said, it may not come out right away, because they really do love the person. They feel real emotions, and they care about the person that they're with. But they haven't learned how to cope and manage challenging circumstances where they feel out of control. So when they don't feel in control, they're going to exert energy to control what's around them. And unfortunately, they can mask that out in the community a lot easier. But when you're with your people, all of us are a little more relaxed when we're with our people. People see who we are, more. But it can take a while. Now, some people who really are very emotionally unstable, they may for a very short time be able to hide it, but you hear of domestic violence and the physical violence happening very early in a lot of relationships because the person just is unhinged, and they may get through the wedding and all that little honeymoon and all that good stuff, but the physical violence can happen very, very soon after the commitment, after they've got you on lock, so to speak. Then you belong to me. You are a possession. Your mind, depending on how they were raised. There's a whole lot of factors I think that come into play to the mindset of someone who's abusive, because a lot of people look at their spouse as a possession, as somebody that they own, that you belong to me, you're mine. And they'll play mental games with the individual, like Nisha said, that, you belong to me. So whatever I say, that's what we're going to do. And it's not a mutual relationship. It is a power and control and manipulation environment. And I would say, like Nisha said, that people should pay attention to the red flags. You need to know what the red flags even are. And a lot of times in your gut, you just, something don't feel right. It's like, but no, your love and how you feel for that person, you automatically want to, you want to reject that thought that this could be intentional, or that this person could really be this way, because you've never seen that side of the individual. But, they say if a person shows you who they are, believe them, and the reality is it's difficult, for a person who is in love with someone. It's easier to say, okay, I'm gonna give them another chance, or okay, I'm gonna forgive them. They can change, they can get better. But when you see the pattern, you have to be able to think about your own mental well-being and your own health and your own soundness of mind. And if this is not what you signed up for, which, who signs up for abuse? Who signs up for being told they're ugly? I've heard a lot of women, they verbal abuse is very prevalent. And Nisha was talking about in the church and pastors, and a lot of times people in leadership positions can have a little bit of a power uh, dynamic, where that need for power translates into their relationship with their loved ones. And it's almost like they dominate their family members, they dominate their wives, they dominate their spouse. And it becomes abusive, because you're not allowing your loved ones to express themselves or make decisions for what they want, or you just talk to them in a negative way, talk to them in a way that makes them feel uncared for, unloved, or unimportant. And over time, like Nisha said, really, you didn't need me. Nisha, you got this, girl. But over time, it chips away at the person's mental well being. And over time, it can deteriorate a person's ability to actually have the drive to fight back, not physically fight back, but to say, no, this is not okay. You know, you really become uh, I don't want to say immobilized, but almost immobilized, mentally immobilized. Like you don't have the capacity to see how you can do anything different, because again, your security might be at risk if you leave. And I think it's important for people to know that there is help out there. There are organizations like Grow. There's organizations out there. There's places that you can go. There are shelters. I know there's a lot of difficulty sometimes because there's a lot of a lot of domestic violence going on out there, and a lot of people need to be somewhere away from their abusers, because some abusers, as we see dramatized on television, they really do hunt down their loved one. They feel like they own that person, and that how dare they leave me. So I'd be curious for Nisha to share a little bit about some of that, because I know you talk with a lot of women now. Nikki, I'm segue into her, because this is not something I can speak on, because I have not been a victim of domestic violence. But I have, in the mental health realm, I have definitely been on the side of ministering mental health to those who have been victimized. But I would like, if Nisha could share a little bit more about the challenges that people have in getting the help that they need, because sometimes people just don't know. They don't know what to do,
Yeah.
so they feel helpless and hopeless to actually get out of the situation.
Right.
Well, before you touch on that, Nisha, you guys,
Hmm.
you both brought up a lot of great points in talking about these red flags, right?
Hmm.
And how sometimes things can be so subtle
Hmm.
that you don't really realize until you're out of the
Hmm.
situation that you actually were in. Like, I
Hmm.
know for me, different things that transpired um in my relationships, there were things that I didn't realize until I got out of the relationship and I got in therapy.
Right.
And I began the healing process, and was bringing up things to my therapist like this happened and that happened, and then that um shocking revelation that, okay,
You're
I
being abused.
was abused,
Hmm.
emotionally, mentally. And I know, Nisha, me and you talked about that, because I think sometimes that's a really weird place to be in,
Hmm.
especially if you, like me, you kind of view yourself as a strong individual, right? And I
Hmm.
know a lot of times for women, I'm going to speak because I'm a woman, I'm not a man. I can speak for women, for women, if we feel like we're strong and, like you said, well, no, I'm going to fight back. Like, you're not going to talk to me like that. Like, um, it can be very unnerving to come to grips with the fact that you at some point were being emotionally abused, you were
Right.
being mentally abused. And like I said, from my own experience, things can be so subtle, and then over time, like Aunt Erica said, over time you realize that you are living in fear.
Right.
Over time you realize that you're living in an environment that is very toxic, or you're living in an environment where this person is controlling you or manipulating you, or you just have such a fear. And there's no where in my mind that I believe that love equates to living in an environment where I am fearful of my spouse, where
Right.
I don't know, are you good today or you not good
Right.
today? Are you going to come home and, terrorize and, do whatever you're going to do? So, can you speak to that a little bit, Nisha, about, those type of environments and how, the characteristics of an abuser, and even maybe a little bit on why sometimes people stay in abusive relationships?
Okay. So share red flags and the signs, blatant and non-blatant, and then transition into the
Mm-hmm.
challenges and barriers that survivors face. Okay.
Yes.
So it's a great point what you said about when you're in an environment and you don't realize how dangerous that environment is. And an example that I always give that I learned when I attended some sort of DV awareness conference or seminar years ago. If you put a frog, it sounds silly, but if you put a frog in a pot of boiling water, it will likely try to hop out immediately because it recognizes, okay, something is wrong here. I'm not supposed to be here and I'm going to get out, right? But if you put a frog in a pot of like cool to lukewarm, like the water that they're used to living in, that kind of temperature. And you turn up that pot of water like a degree every other day or so, just subtly, just turning it up a degree every other day or so. That frog is in danger, but doesn't recognize that it's in danger because it has become accustomed to its environment. It's not like you turned up their comfort zone and put it on boiling the next day. You're gradually turning up that degree a notch every other day, every other week, or whatever. And by the time that frog realizes its life is in danger, maybe it might be almost too late for them to get out. Maybe they, aren't able to get out. But that's kind of how abuse works. It's a very gradual process. It's just so manipulative. So one of the red flags that we don't talk about is love bombing, right? That's when someone is using grandiose gestures to basically reel you in, whether it's grandiose romantic gestures or expensive gifts, overshowering you with compliments and things like that very early on into the relationship. So if I meet somebody and we're talking for like 2-3 days, and the next day they're like, you know what, I just think we're soulmates. I just think we're supposed to be together. I can't see myself with anybody else but you. And if you're wondering, if you're feeling like this relationship is moving too fast, that gut is telling you like, okay, this is moving very quickly. This person is popping up at my job with flowers. And just to put that out there, it's a difference between courting. You know when you're being courted, or you should know. That's what we're talking about, the green flags and the red flags. You should know what healthy courting is versus when someone is love bombing you, because love bombing is just used to see how far can I go? How many boundaries can I cross? Am I able to just pop up at your house 3 days after meeting you and just say, oh, I was just in the neighborhood. I was just wondering if I could come by. And it's like, oh, okay. I didn't know you even knew where I lived, but okay, sure. Just come on in, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I just love you so much. I just couldn't wait to see you. You look so beautiful today. There's nobody else in this world I've never met anyone who is more beautiful than you. Again, there's a difference from courting and love bombing, because if I can keep overshowering you with these watches and with the flowers and with the expensive trips and all of these things very, 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 very early in a relationship, that is a red flag, because the whole goal is to suck you in, make you feel like our brain, we feed off of, that affection, that love. We get high, so to speak, off of these feelings of euphoria, right? And then when it's taken away, then you crash down, and it's like, what do I need to do in order to get that feeling back? And so when you have somebody who's willing to do that to you, it's something to pay attention to. We talked about the isolation. If your partner is making it so that you're finding yourself on an island, you used to go out every Monday with your girlfriends to dinner, and now you're not allowed to do that. You used to play volleyball, or you used to run track, but your partner doesn't like people looking at you in your track shorts. You used to love poetry, or you used to love writing and singing, but now they're just chipping away at that. So you only find yourself with this person all the time. They have become your support system. Because if it's a way to isolate you from everything and everyone you know and love, then it's easier for you to be reliant on me. And that way, where are you going to go? Who are you going to tell? If you have isolated yourself from everyone, that's what I did. I didn't realize I was doing it. My family, I'm originally from New Jersey, so most of my family is in New Jersey and New York. And then I have my dad here, and then I have my friends here. And it was very easy to say, nah, I'm good, I'm okay, because most of my family's out of state. And even the people that are here, the loved ones that are here, oh, I'm just busy with the kids, or oh, I'm not going to go to the open mic tonight. Oh, no, I can't go to the movies today, because it's just this person made it like, oh, I just want to spend time with you because I care about you. That's all. And you don't find yourself, you don't realize that you're being controlled, and that all of a sudden you used to be the social butterfly, but this person is slowly just chipping away, just chipping away. If somebody is, they used to like when you wore tight jeans, or they used to like when you wore a certain wear, like clothing, and all of a sudden there's an issue with it. Who are you trying to impress? Who are you trying to look good for? Why are you wearing makeup? That's something to pay attention to. If someone uses terms like, if you leave me, I don't know what I would do. I'll kill myself if you break up with me. That is a form of emotional abuse, psychological abuse. You're using manipulation to keep this person here in this cycle of abuse. And some of the barriers, that challenges that people face, survivors face, The most dangerous time for a victim of domestic violence is when they're trying to leave or have recently left. So a lot of times people will say, well, why don't you just leave? Well, the most dangerous time, because again, abuse is about power and control. If I am leaving or have found my way out, that person who is perpetrating the abuse has now lost that power and control, or it's diminishing. So now they have to elevate the methods that they use to control you, to maintain that power. So now it got to be more severe. Now it has to be more intense. Now it has to be more frequent, because all of this stuff that I did before obviously didn't work if now you're finding your way back out and away from me. That's why it's so important to have a safety plan, whether you speak with a trusted advocate, with a local domestic violence agency or the National Domestic Violence Agency, whether you speak with a friend who's going to hold an emergency bag for you in the trunk of their car, or maybe stash $5, $10, $20 every pay period away. Because again, we talked about financial abuse. If I have no access to financial resources, if I have no money, no gas, I'm isolated from my family and friends, my support system is in another state, my partner didn't allow me to work, all the shelters are full, I have kids, I have pets. How do we get up and just leave? How do we get up and just go? Because if somebody got me for my purse and my debit card and my credit cards and my wallet right now and said, I need you to get back home to Jersey to your mom and your sisters right now, but I have no money, no resources, maybe my phone was damaged in an assault, how am I getting out? How am I just leaving? You know, there's challenges that men who go through abusive relationships, will they be believed by the police? If we talk about communities of color, black and brown, well, you're supposed to keep what happens in the home. That's supposed to stay in the home. So you're not supposed to talk about it. Or if I called the police on my black husband or my black boyfriend, will they make it home alive? Because we look at the climate that we're in, and there's a distrust of the system. So if, and again, back to men, if I've had women who, or men rather, who have said, well, you know, I'm in this situation, but she said, I'm gonna tell the police you hit me. Who you think they're gonna believe first, me or you? Or if you tell the police, you will never see your kids again. I'll never let you see your kids again. And on the flip side, that happens to women as well. If they are controlled to the point where they cannot live, literally, because they don't have the financial means, they don't have a job, they don't have anything. But if you call the police and you're in a shelter, but now your partner, which I've seen countless times, gets custody of the kids because they were the breadwinner. So they're the ones who maintain the house. The deed is in their name, the property is in their name. You have nothing to your name. How do you get custody of your kids? If you don't have access to the legal system, legal aid, money to obtain an attorney, money to get a divorce, anything, how do we just get out? If you're from another country and you don't speak the language and your partner doesn't allow you to learn English, who are you calling for help? If they threaten to have you deported, if you call, if they threaten to rip up your immigration papers, who are you going to call? So it's so many different barriers, and there's fear. There's fear. I am terrified that this person not only will hurt me, maybe they will hurt somebody I know and somebody that I love and care about. And there's love. Half the time, more than half, you don't want the relationship to end, you want the abuse to end. And where you feel crazy, so to speak, for lack of a better term, abusive relationships are not always bad. You have good times. I had a lot of good times with my ex. I had a lot of inside jokes. He was funny. He loved to dance. You know, we liked the same music. We liked the same movies. So when you're battling with yourself, and you talked about that, Kia, about how it's like you're literally wrestling with yourself. So you're just like, okay, what do I got to do? Maybe if I'm more of this or less of that, then I can make this person be that good person all the time. So maybe I just got to change me just this much or this much so that that person can be the person I love all the time. And you can't do it. So those are just some of the red flags and challenges. I feel like I started getting real like spoken word, like
No.
like I was talking to like,
No,
but
I loved
you
it.
can see I'm very passionate. I'm very
No,
passionate.
I love that. That's so good. And man, like you hit on so many things that like even, me and you had talked about before about, that generational
Mhm.
piece. And I want to just touch on that really briefly. And Erica, you can speak to this, especially as it relates to, divorce, because this is,
Mhm.
my platform about divorce. And a lot of times, sometimes, marriages end because of abuse in a relationships. But I'm very much aware that there is a generation, and there's a generation, and there are cultural elements. When people say things like, we don't talk about our business, and I think that is one thing that keeps individuals in bondage, and it keeps them in these toxic and healthy relationships where it's like, what happens in the house stays in the house. We don't go out there, we don't talk about our business, we not talking about what happened. Everything gets swept under the rug, and that's how you end up with these generational cycles where you have generation of men, or generation of men and women within the family that are either abusers or they have gotten abused. And you know there is this idea of, well, let's just stay in the relationship. And I think, me, Nisha, we talked about that, and me, Aunt Erica, we've talked about that too, where there's this idea, especially I'm going to bring it into the church realm, of just pray through it, just pray through it. God is able to turn, that person around that may be abusing you, or whatever the case may be. I had someone tell me, well, you young people give up too easily, and you need to stay in the situation longer, and then the person will eventually change. Can you speak a little bit to how sometimes generation and that kind of mindset of, well, we'll just stay in it, and eventually, maybe in 40
Mhm.
years, we'll be better. 40 years, we'll like each other, or whatever the case may be.
Well, unfortunately, a pattern of dysfunction is developed as people are exposed to those same patterns of behavior. Like Nisha said earlier, people again repeat what they see. So if this is the way it's done in your family and this is the way it's done, if you have this beautiful uh, image to the community and to the world and in the church to the church family, but then when you go home your kids are seeing the reality that mommy beats up on daddy or daddy's cussing mommy out, and there's this outside image, but that's not the reality. And unfortunately, that is also what can cause a lot of young people to become confused about their faith, when they see that this is, this uh, illusion of happiness that people put on for the world. But then when you go back into the home behind closed doors, there's a lot of dysfunction, a lot of lack of love, the things that the Bible teaches us they don't see demonstrated in their home. And some do not actually replicate. They go far from what they saw because they recognize it as wrong. They looked at what it did to their mother, or they looked at what it did to their father, and they don't want to repeat that. Unfortunately, it can occur that people do repeat that. So it is passed down through the generations because, again, people do what they see and they don't know anything differently. And I will say this, that our community, the Black community, um, is becoming more amenable to therapy and getting help, and not trying to act like we can figure it out on our own, and if we just pray on it, it'll go away. No, these are deep seated problems that the abuser, they're not always quote unquote bad people. Like Nisha said, there's good in people, but they don't have the coping skills to manage their own inner stuff. So they project it on other people. And unfortunately, it's the people closest to them that end up becoming the victim of their inner instability. And that's the sad part. And in order to, I will say this, when you talk about patterns, the pattern is not something that just happened. It's something they probably experienced before where they lost someone because they saw the truth. They saw, red flags and maybe weren't having it, because they weren't married to the person yet, and they lost those relationships. So then they also have that trauma in their mind that, okay, well, I got to do something to keep this person. They're not going to leave me like the other person left me. But they don't look at the fact that it's the dysfunctional behaviors that they have that have lended to the reason why those relationships don't work. And oftentimes it's very difficult for the person to look at themselves. I'll say with a lot of personality disorders, oftentimes they don't take ownership. They have a hard time accepting that they were the reason why something occurred. They will project to other people and, like Nisha said, manipulate and control and make the other person feel like it was your fault that I hit you. It was your fault that the bills didn't get paid. How is it my fault when I don't have a job? It's irrational things that will be said over time. It's just like, we've seen, and I'm making a reference to our uh, past political environment where if a person says something enough times, then in the mind of people, it becomes true. And unfortunately, that's not real, but that is an abusive personality that will keep telling you the same thing over and over and over again until, again, either you question your own sanity or you think, okay, well, maybe they're right, and then you do end up being a person who is not able to think rationally when you are a victim of abuse. And it really, I will say, one of the biggest things that I would encourage anybody to do is to not allow yourself to be totally disconnected from someone else on the outside who can be a support to you. As hard as that is, but if a person is so abusive to they're trying to disconnect you from every single person, which is what usually happens, even in non-physical abusive relationships, it's that control that they want to move you away from your support system. Because if you have connection to people on the outside, then other people can influence you to get away from that negative environment and will tell you when you can't rationally think that that's not okay. Because sometimes you've gotten to this point where you're not mentally able to say, well, like Nisha said, I'm gonna make the adjustment. I'm gonna do what's necessary to make this work, because that's what we do in any healthy relationship is we make sacrifices to make it work. So we apply those same principles even in a unhealthy relationship. But you have to look at the fact that those unhealthy relationships leave you empty, leave you wanting, leave you without. And so the reality is you have to have the capacity to at some point reach out to someone outside of your home, outside of your relationship, to sometimes just to share so that you can get a different perspective. Because again, like you said, Nakia, sometimes it's like, well, is something wrong with me?
Mhm.
This something ain't right. This can't be right. People keep telling me to, stay, hang on in there. But the reality is sometimes you do have to have someone who's outside of your situation that you can actually talk to that will tell you, that's not okay. That's not
Right.
okay. Because in your heart of hearts, you know that, but we have
Mhm.
all those other reasons why we try to make it work and hoping that it will change. And
Mhm.
unless that person gets some mental health support and does some hard work
Mhm.
about their issues that cause them to be a abusive personality, um, they'll do it again. They'll do it
Mhm.
again. It'll happen in relationships. They have to
Yeah.
get help. And of course, we know there's situations where the Lord can truly change people, but people got to want to change. God don't
Right.
change nobody who doesn't want to change. Number one. So that's
Right.
for that argument. But sometimes abusers don't see that they need to. They don't see where
Right.
they need to do anything different.
Yeah. When we talk, Nisha, about what does it look like to start over and to move on, one of the big things I know for me that I talk to my therapist a lot about was creating healthy boundaries, right? And healthy boundaries don't just start, in romantic relationships. They start with all relationships that you are in. As an individual, you need to create healthy boundaries. So can you talk a little bit about that? But there was something that me and you had talked about offline. We know the typical things, right? We know sexual abuse, we know physical abuse, we know emotional abuse. This new, like you said, the new term that's kind of trending now is being is gaslighting. Something I learned was love bombing. But there's talk a little bit also about like threats, because there are individuals that live in homes where the person may be putting holes in the wall, or they may be punching the door or kicking in, or whatever the case may be, and they're saying, well, I'm not abusing you, you're not in an abusive relationship. Can you speak a little bit about that, and how tie all that into, I guess, the importance of having boundaries?
Okay, that's a great question. So, with the hitting of the doors or the breaking picture frames or breaking furniture and things like that, it's showing that the person who is putting out that behavior, that is showing that behavior, that they have the tendency to be violent, that they do not necessarily know how to control their emotions. They do not necessarily know how to cope with whatever angst or frustration or whatever it is that they have inside them. And somebody who is willing to punch a door while you're standing next to it, or punch a wall, or what have you, is showing you what they are capable of. They're showing you that, look, this could be you. You know what I mean? And just because it isn't the person that they hit, doesn't mean it's not abusive. Because going back to what we said in abuse in the beginning, abuse is about power and control. It's a pattern of behavior that is meant to intimidate, harm, control, manipulate, physically harm, psychologically, or what have you. So someone who is punching a wall. You're arguing and they just go and they punch this wall. The person who is watching that their partner punch this wall is likely feeling fear, likely
Mm-hmm.
feeling intimidated, likely wondering, okay, I don't know what to do next. This is all a form of abuse. It's all part of that emotional, verbal, psychological, physical, all of that. It's all encompassing. And what's next? The thing about abuse, it escalates. It doesn't all the time start off. It's rarely. I've been doing this work 10 years. Not only do I have my nonprofit organization, I worked in the prosecutor's office as a DV advocate. I worked in the police department in the special victims unit, which is where the domestic violence unit was placed inside of. So I've seen it not just from working in the community, but also working within the legal system, the criminal justice system. And rarely, I can't even count where a survivor has told me, yeah, on our first date, this person hit me. You know what I
Wow.
mean? It's always a gradual thing. So when
Mm-hmm.
you have someone, it's escalating. Before, maybe on your second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever date, let's say you're dating a few months, they probably wasn't punching holes in the walls. And then one day they punched a hole in the wall. So you could say that has escalated from when you first started dating them and started seeing little signs, had a little inkling of a thought that, okay, something isn't right here. They kind of get irritated with me quickly, or they don't want me to wearing these things or hanging out with certain friends all of a sudden, you
Right.
know? And then what's next? Now we're hitting pets, because someone
Mm-hmm.
who's willing to kick a door might be willing to kick your dog. And I've seen that happen as well. Or now I'm hitting the kids and now I'm hitting you. And to Miss Erica's point, she said how when you have someone and they start off being just that violence happens early. The first time my ex put his hands on me, now we had been dating for years at this point. It
Mm-hmm.
had been an abusive relationship for years, but I didn't recognize it as abusive because it didn't fit the neat little box of what I thought domestic violence looked like,
Right.
what I thought a domestic violence victim looked like. But when he first physically assaulted me, he strangled me in that assault.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a drastic, somebody who strangles you, you are much the chances that you will be killed by your partner if they strangle you
Yeah.
increase significantly, because anybody who could put their hands on your throat and squeeze is telling you that I can take your life. I can. And a great analogy that I heard years ago at a conference, they said, when you have survivors, they'll say, oh, they just choked me. That's okay. That it's just not a big deal. I didn't pass out or anything. And just to point that out, there's a difference between choking and strangulation. Choking is when you have something internally blocking your airways.
Right.
Strangulation is when there's an external force, whether it's hands, a belt, a scarf, a forearm, something along those lines. That's when it's strangulation. And as this analogy said, when someone says, well, strangulation isn't that serious, well, you never see a lion grab its prey by the ankles. A lion goes
Mm-hmm.
straight for the throat if it can.
Mm-hmm.
So this person is showing you that they can take your life. So abuse, it escalates. It's going to escalate in severity, frequency, and all of that. So someone who's punching holes in walls because they're angry at you, if they're slapping a wall, if they're throwing furniture, if they're breaking your phone, that is a toxic, unhealthy, that is not a healthy, at the bare minimum, that is an unhealthy relationship.
Right.
So, but it's important to create boundaries, not just within romantic relationships, but within yourself. Because, like you said, what's that starting over look like? When you get out of an abusive relationship, it's not like you're automatically healed. And you said, you know what?
Right.
I think what's today? Tuesday. I'm gonna be healed today. It's about 8:47. I'm gonna be healed. Like, no, that's not how it works. Healing is an
Right.
everyday journey. It
Every
isn't
day.
in it's up and down. Sometimes it sucks. Sometimes there's good days. Sometimes there's bad days. Something I struggle with even years later is the innate need to prove that I'm enough. Like that's something within myself. I have to prove. So it makes me go harder at everything that I do. So I have to prove I'm good enough to myself. I have to prove I'm good enough in this job. I have to prove I'm good enough at this speaking engagement. I have to prove I'm good enough in a panel discussion such as this. So the thing is about creating these boundaries, finding out what brings you peace. What are your non-negotiables in any relationship, whether that's a friendship, whether that's familial, whether that's a professional relationship, romantic. What are your boundaries? What are your boundaries within yourself? If every day I tell myself, you know what, you suck, you're trash, you're ugly, I hate you, the boundary should be no, you know what, every time I negative talk myself, I'm going to counter that with 3 positive things for every negative thought. And it's about enforcing those boundaries, because boundaries aren't for other people, they're for you. They're to keep you safe. So what will keep your spirit, your heart, your mental, your physical, all of that, what needs to be put in place, what set of rules need to be put in place to keep all of those things safe? And it's important in any healing journey to exert boundaries.
Nakia?
Definitely. I yeah. I go ahead. Go ahead, Andre.
Oh, I was just going to say on the tail end of what Nisha said, something that came to my mind is, like she said, so many times people stay in the dysfunctional, abusive relationships for years. A lot of times they'll wait because their children need to graduate, or they come up with reasons and
Mm-hmm.
milestones for when they're going to get out, and try to rationalize the best time frame to get out. But I will say to anyone who's listening who is dealing with an abusive situation, if you know you're in an abusive situation, um, like Nisha said, you need a plan. You need a
Right.
plan, and you need to start really thinking about it, because we had a young lady. Well, she wasn't a young lady, she was an older lady who realized that she was in an abusive relationship as a result of one of your previous shows. And she was able to start doing the work to take care of
Wow.
herself,
Wow.
and so this is a meaningful platform, and it's definitely going to help a lot of people. Um, People need the courage to be able to say, I love myself enough to get out. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not always an easy thing. It's not
Yeah.
always an easy thing, but it can be done. Nisha is the
Yeah.
proof of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But no matter how old you are, was the point that I was really trying to
Mm-hmm.
make. It, it doesn't matter how young or how old you are. When you realize you're a victim of abuse, get
Right.
some help and
Yeah.
get out.
And not even and not even saying that, you know I love myself enough. But something that Nisha said too, even her foundation name is coming to the realization that you are worth more, and coming to that realization, you know, that guess what? God has more for me and God has better for me, and that He did not put me on this earth to be abused by anyone in any sense of the word. And I think that a person has to come to that realization, and it's important to understand um to and sometimes it is going to require you to make a difficult decision, even especially if you have children, because if it's a thing that it's generational, you don't want that to become a part and that to trickle down, because even when children are young, they can internalize, and they see things that are going on between mom and dad. They see things that are going on, and you don't want that, because you don't want to then teach them that anger, like Nisha was saying. Okay, I'm mad, so I'm gonna put a hole in the wall. Okay, I'm mad, so I'm gonna kick the wall. Oh, I'm mad, so I'm gonna put my fist through the door. Those things, like we said in the very, very beginning, that abuse is learned. And a lot of times in these homes where there is dysfunction and toxicity, they have not learned the proper way to express anger, the proper way to express emotion or fear or even love, because for some people they think control is love. They think me manipulating, or me, like Anisha said, trying to hold on to this person is love. And so I just say, especially if you have children, to be mindful of that, because sometimes what you are going through, you may be thinking that it's just affecting you, but it can definitely also affect your children. I know, Nisha, you can speak to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one, it definitely children who grow up in households are either more likely to become a perpetrator of abuse or a victim of it. And we know that they don't always happen because abuse is a choice. Just because you
Yes,
grow up
yes,
and you have witnessed that, and while it may be understandable because you grew up in that, why you think this is the right way to show emotions and love and anger and things like that doesn't mean it's acceptable to show your
right.
emotions in that manner. I once had someone who was incarcerated. It was a gentleman, he was in his 60s and he had been incarcerated since he was about 29 or 30 years old. He was incarcerated because, and I didn't find this out until later, he wrote a letter to Grow and started writing a series of letters, and he wanted to bring awareness to domestic violence from the standpoint of someone who exerted that violence. And he had taken his wife's life when he
Wow.
was when he was about 29, 30 years old. So here he is, 60, and writing a letter and saying how this isn't really talked about
Mm,
in jail, in prison. It wasn't really talked about. It was taboo. You didn't really share, hey, I'm in jail because I, you know, took the life of my spouse or my partner. And one of the
mm,
things he said that really stuck out, well, one, I used to share with his permission excerpts of his letter on social media. And I
mhm.
started having advocates, and I'm very passionate about this. Advocates started messaging me saying, listen, you need to pretty much like you need to remember whose side you're on, kind of
Mhm.
thing. And for me, it's like you can't fix one half of the problem.
Right,
We can't just offer survivors resources and help. And I'm saying this as a survivor, right? But we
mhm.
have to offer some sort of rehabilitative services to those who are exhibiting that abuse. So whether it's mental health, like Miss Erica said,
Mhm.
whether it's batters intervention programs, and again, it's not that I don't think everyone can change, every abusive person can change, but I think those who really want to and
Right,
want to do the work and take accountability and are willing to do what's necessary to become a better person, I do think they can. It's nothing that a survivor or anybody else can do to change them, but they have to
right.
be willing to do it. But one thing this
Mhm.
gentleman said, he said when he was young, he was violent. He started exhibiting violence when he was about 8, 9 years old in class. So he was written off as the bad kid. So he
Mm,
would be asked to stay after class. He would be sent to the principal's office. He would get letters sent home. Nobody knew that he was witnessing experience extreme violence at the hands of his father. He was watching his father beat his mother without mercy for every day since he's 8 years old, having witnessed that for years. So he just
wow.
kept getting written off as the bad kid. They don't know why he's coming to class disheveled. His hair is unkempt. His clothes aren't clean. He's not sleeping. He's not eating. He has bags under his eyes. Nobody is paying attention to the bad kid. So then by the time he's in seventh, eighth grade, he's very awkward socially. He's exhibiting anxiety, depression, all of these different things. So now he's the weird kid. So then by the time he's in 10th grade, that's when he hit his first girlfriend. So he becomes violent by age 15 years old. So now you have the bad kid turned into the weird kid who turned into the abusive kid, but no one took the
Wow.
time to look into this little boy who is
Right.
8 years old and wondering, well, what's wrong? What's going on at home? So I think it's important that we have platforms such as this and that we educate our teachers and our counselors and our students.
Right.
I've spoken at schools where counselors don't know anything about gaslighting or love bombing or teenage dating violence. And it's like, but
Right.
we're working with kids. Like, what are we doing? So I think we have to educate our community so that we can be more proactive rather than reactive. And instead of just figuring out, well, why did this bad kid, why is he breaking pencils and hitting kids and throwing chalk and things
Mm,
like that? What's wrong? Are we looking into the kids who are withdrawn and who are sad or who are just socially awkward?
right.
Like, what are we doing to see, are you okay? And then going from there, because that's how we start breaking this cycle. Because
Right.
I mean, it was just really interesting. And to hear what unfortunately ultimately happened, he continued that cycle of violence. His father continued to be very violent towards his mother. And he then continued that cycle until and that's not excusing anything, because he
Hmm.
definitely made the choice to become the man who he
Right.
became. But what could have been done to talk to that 8-year-old boy who started showing those signs that something was wrong?
Right. Right. Wow. Man, this has been really good, and we could go on for another hour because the topic is needed, and there's so much to talk about, like you just said, not just from a survivor angle, but also from a perpetrator. And this generational element is so important, and I really don't think a lot of people are aware or understand the severity of how important it is the way we raise our children and the things that we expose them to. Like you said, Nisha, not to negate free will and choice and what a person chooses to do, as they get older and whatever the case may be. But I do think there is something to be said about, those formative years and what our children are exposed to as adults, what we expose them to, and then even what, talking to them about what they are exposed to out in the community. I gotta have you come back, Nisha, to talk a little bit more because, like I said, there's definitely so much more to talk about with this domestic violence. But I do want to wrap up. Aunt Erica, give us some closing remarks. And Nisha, if you could share some resources for individuals who may be going through this right now. This platform is, talking about divorce, and I am very keenly aware that, abuse sometimes ends divorce, unfortunately. But, as I always say, divorce is not the end. And every day is about healing, every day is about getting better. And to everyone listening, if you know someone that may be a victim of abuse, or if you know someone that's in a toxic and an unhealthy relationship, just being that person in their life to let them know their self-worth and to encourage them to know that they are loved. And, bottom line, with all that we have said tonight, with the characteristics of abusers and what abuse looks like in relationship, I just want everyone to know that in love, you deserve to feel safe. You deserve to have someone that appreciates you, and is not, abusing you, for lack of a better term. So go ahead, Aunt Erica, go ahead and give us some closing remarks, and then Nisha, if you can share any resources or any last minute thoughts, encouragement that you have for anyone who may be listening tonight.
Okay. Nisha, I don't know if you were planning to share, were you planning to share the hotline information? No, because I don't want to share it if you were going to share it. That's what I'm asking. I'm gonna let you do that. I'm gonna
Okay.
just share some thoughts about what a person can do if they are in a situation and they're really ready to get the help. I mean, people are sometimes afraid to call the police. They're threatened not to call the police. If you call the police, or if you get asked for someone to help you, then I'll kill you. They make real valid threats of what they will do, so they put fear inside of the person that they won't seek out that help. But calling the police is definitely an option. There are different services like going to, of course, the emergency room, if you needed to, if you're injured. And that's an opportunity where a lot of times people will hide what's happening to them, but that is a missed opportunity to actually get help. So if you are in the emergency room and you can say, hey, I'm being hurt, I'm being abused, I need a safe place. Sometimes, again, the manipulation is they have your kids, so they're going to use your kids to make sure you come back home, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're by yourself and you can get the help at that point, that's an opportunity that you might not want to miss. If you need to press charges because you are being hurt, you can ask the magistrate office to issue a warrant, because sometimes it just gets that serious. And also, protective orders can be arranged through the magistrate or juvenile and domestic relations court. Also, encouraging people to have like a, a important papers put to the side somewhere, so when they need to make a quick move, they have what they need, because a lot of times it's hard for people to start over because they've left everything with the abuser. So those were just a few of the things I did want to share in closing. And I'm sorry, Nisha. Hopefully, I didn't tip into some of the things you were going to say. But Kia, thank you for the opportunity. Again, Nisha, you definitely need to come back and do this, because you got so much wealth of information to share. And I'm just grateful to have been a part of the presentation tonight. Thank you, Kia.
Thank you, Miss Erica. No, you didn't tip in anything. And even if you did, that means they just heard the information they needed twice. So it's fine. And thank you, Kia, so much for having me. I did just want to say, if you know someone who is in an abusive relationship, just some ways you can help: listening without judgment, just offering a listening ear, understanding that even though you may not understand why they may go back or the choices that they're making, you have to respect the decision, because they are the expert in their situation. They're the ones who's navigating that household every single day, not us. So we can just offer that listening ear, that instead of saying, why don't you just leave? Maybe saying, what are the barriers preventing you from getting to safety, and how can I help you overcome those barriers? One is can be accusatory or putting the onus on the survivor, like, well, why don't you just get out? And another is very empowering and gives them opportunity to use their voice and have a say so in their own journey. And that way, if you do identify the barriers, hey, I don't have childcare, I don't have a car, then that way you can sort of tackle some of those issues together. That's what it's about, tackling it together. Even if all you can do, and I say all loosely because there's nothing too small, if it's just giving a hotline number, that's something you can do to help. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, that number is 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. The website is www.thehotline.org. That has information as far as how to safety planning with yourself, safety planning if you have children, safety planning if you have pets. It also gives you information on various resources and just great information on the different types of domestic violence and what resources are available for you to seek assistance. Domesticshelters.org is a really good one as well. That is I think the country's largest resource database for where you can put in a zip code and it will pull up the DV agencies and resources, how to get a protective order, all of that right within your city, state, county. Also, womenslaw.org is a really good one. It doesn't just help women, but that is designed to offer plain language legal advice, legal information for victims of domestic violence. So you can look up your state, your city, and see what the requirements are to get a protective order, where to go to get a protective order, what does stalking look like, what does harassment look like, all of these different things. So that's womenslaw.org. And of course, you have Grow Foundation and all of these great resources right here in the Hampton Roads. You can literally just Google your zip code, put domestic violence support or something along those lines, and resources available to you should come up. And if you are experiencing abuse, just want you to know that I know it sounds cliche, but you're not alone and there is help. And just to please talk to somebody you trust. The first step is recognizing you don't deserve it. And the second step is telling somebody else so that you can get to the life that you do deserve. So thank you so much, Kia, for having me. And Erica, it's always a pleasure to see you. And yeah, whenever you're ready to have me come back, just let me know.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Aunt Erica, for your input and your words of wisdom. As always, thank you, Nisha, for being so transparent and open about your survivor story and now activist. Definitely going to have you come back on because we need to talk a little bit more about these relationships, not just for individuals that are older, but I think this is a necessary conversation for our young people on what to look for and what is considered a healthy relationship and what is considered not healthy, so that they are able to set those boundaries for themselves so that they are not hopefully getting into marriages or these committed relationships where things are turning south. Again, thank you guys all for watching, for commenting. Please, if you caught the tail end, go back to the beginning. Nisha had some excellent information. Her story is awesome. Please share, tag someone, send it to somebody's inbox that needs to hear this. Until the next time, I love you guys for watching. Thank you so much.